Welcome to the Future of Supply Chain, presented by Dynamo. Each episode, we sit down with leaders in the industry as we build the future of supply chain together. Let's get into the show. Here's our host, Santosh Sankar.
Hey, ladies and gents, welcome back to the Future Supply Chain Podcast. I'm your host, Santosh Sankar, and joining me today, live from Paris, is Alex Barroux, co-founder and CEO of Bonx. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Santosh. Thanks. Great to be here.
You poked some fun at me because this has been somewhat a long time coming as proud investors of Bonx. So I'm excited to kind of dig into not just Bonx, but all the subject matter around ERP, because this is certainly in vogue amongst customers and equally kind of the venture community, given the pending SAP end of support period that's staring everyone down. But I'm going to shut up here, and I'd love for you to just quick 90-second skinny on what you and the team at Bonx are building.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the invite, Santosh. So basically, Bonx, what we're doing is we are a manufacturing ERP for mid-market companies. And basically what we saw at the beginning of the company is like all these companies are using either very clunky software that either are like partially deployed or not deployed at all, or were really hard to deploy. And some of them are just not using anything because they fear, the big like hell of implementation. And so what we built is basically a no-code interface that you can basically embed LLMs in. So you can basically really make use of AI. And the things it allows is first to deploy much, much faster the ERP. So we deploy right in 3 to 6 weeks right now, compared to the months or years of traditional ERPs. We can also address very well and very deep most of manufacturing use cases. So we can go to any factory, and 99% of the use cases we can go very deep in thanks to that interface. And the last thing is we really made users autonomous in the way they can make the evolution of the tool and their interface through time. And the thing it solves is usually would have to go to professional services and like integrators to actually do the modification and spend a lot of money on making your tool evolve. And this is just completely directly embedded in Bonx. The last thing I would say is we focus on operations. And so for manufacturing companies, we just chose from the beginning in the vision of Bonx not to do the general ledger, the accounting part of the tool. And what allows us to have first very fast go-to-market, because we can just sell the operation software and connect to the general ledger of our clients, but also allows for a lot of partnerships with just softwares which are specialized either on the CRM part or on the finance part.
Amazing. Well, we're going to dig into a lot of that in our discussion. But what's the Alexander story? How did you even get into the world of ERPs?
Well, it's a very short story. So I basically, when I was young, I was just doing my 3, 4, 5 years of studies, just mostly doing music. So didn't really follow classes while I was very young, and I ended up in the business world after my business studies. And actually, my first professional experience as an employee ended up being the last, because I was one of the first employees at OSS Ventures, which is a Paris-based firm that well now, because you are co-investors at Bonx. And basically my life there was, I arrived, there was 6, 7 employees. I was one of the product managers. There were 2 product managers. And so following Renan, and learning from him. And very quickly I was stolen from the product team, became the first go-to-market manager, we call that, at OSS. And basically my job was to take a company that was 2 months old or 2 years old or whatever, and either do a first go-to-market or build a go-to-market for international or rebuild a go-to-market. And I did that about 8-10 times on different startups. The common point between all the startups is they were all selling to manufacturing companies. And it depended what type of manufacturing companies. Sometimes it was really big manufacturing companies, sometimes very small, but all selling to manufacturing companies. And one of them happened to be Bonx. And so that's just how I became CEO. And that's also how I met Remy, who's on the technical side, co-founder and CTO of Bonx. And basically, at the same time, I was building companies and doing, building companies at OSS. Remy came, and his previous experiences was, well, he obviously had been coding for a long, long time, but he did a PhD in microelectronics, which led him to work for manufacturing companies and eventually built ERPs for manufacturing companies. So he actually built 2 from scratch, specific ERPs for his manufacturing companies, because he didn't find the right ones, the right fit when he did, went through the whole looking for an ERP process and all that. Interestingly, those ERPs are still used by those manufacturing companies, so we cannot sell to them. But yeah, so that's a bit the story, and here we are now.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I oftentimes mention to people that Remy has built several ERPs prior to even Bonx, and most people go, "Oh wow, like that's kind of crazy." But we're happy to have him. He is kind of our fearless product leader. But I'm going to step forward here in the conversation, right? And some could argue that at Bonx we've entered a crowded and very mature market. And so I'd be curious, like, how do you define the Bonks edge and positioning relative to both legacy players, but also kind of any incumbents that we've seen pop up over the years?
Yeah, for sure. So the fact that it's crowded first, I think it is not necessarily a bad sign. It means that there's a lot of budget, that it's a very mission critical software, and so a lot of companies were built to solve that problem, right? And it's actually the biggest software TAM in the world, right? Now, what you see in the manufacturing market, and what's interesting is lots of companies that supposedly have an ERP or bought an ERP, the ERP is a lot of times not even deployed, and it's been 10 or 15 years the company has bought the ERP. Like just last Monday, we were at a mid-market food manufacturer, and basically they had bought an ERP, like 10, 15 years ago, specialized for agri-food and all that. They are only using it for commercial management. So like, yeah, just basically like taxes and like discounts and stuff, and a bit of purchasing, and not at all all the factories running on paper. So even companies which are supposedly equipped are actually not equipped. The second thing that's very interesting with that market is, since you come from a very, world from the 80s, like 80s, 90s, even 2000s with like on-premise versions, a lot of those versions are just like stopped to be maintained. And actually, I talked about the SAP stop to maintain some of the versions. It's coming for all ERPs, and so you have old versions not maintained and upcoming versions that are not going to be maintained anymore as well. And so this is a huge opportunity for new players who have an edge to actually get into the door and replace and displace those systems. Our edge at Bonx is very simple. The first thing is we don't do the finance thing. We only focus on operations. It gives us like a unique focus, and we try to be excellent at this and excellent on the operations management of manufacturing companies. The second thing is there is no software right now that allows that simply to cover very deep 99% of manufacturing use cases. You cannot find that software. And so how we do that again is we allow users and like very easily customize processes through no-code interface. So that's one. We also have unmatched UX UI, and UX UI is like it can seem like simple, but it's actually very important for manufacturing, especially when you want to get adoption on the shop floor.
That's
and
right.
when you want to get full traceability of your production, when you actually want to manage your production planning well, you need your teams to adopt the software. And the way we do this is to have the best UX UI on the market. So that's already some big edge cases. And the last thing I would say is right now nobody can deploy as fast as we can. We've already proven we can do 4 weeks, 5 weeks implementations on significant size companies, 50 people, 60 people companies, and so we're just there, and like I don't think anybody else can do it.
Yeah, yeah. And kind of one thing that I also recall is there are legacy players who have found mid-market opportunities and been honest enough to say, we're never going to be able to service them, keep them happy, but you should meet Bonks because we think they're the next thing coming for your segment of the market, which I think
Absolutely.
is a very powerful thing experience whenever we get those referrals.
No, absolutely. Actually, I have a client who told me, guys, like it's about to close client, and he was referred by a very big ERP player, and he told me, guys, I don't know why I trust you, but I trust you. I think it might be because of two things: because of your demo, and because you were referred by these very big ERP players. And these guys said you should go see Bongs for your manufacturing operations. So it's very interesting.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So we've kind of talked about a lot of the Bonks focus around the mid market, right? The mid market manufacturer who hasn't had sufficient tooling over decades. But this is also a group that we found kind of struggles with balancing customization with simplicity. Um, Now, how does Bonks kind of approach that tension as you think about product design, integrations you alluded to, only focusing on kind of the production modules, but also some of the AI capability you've had to drive implementations more easily.
No, absolutely. And it's a big topic because, first, manufacturing is complex, right? So you need to have a first baseline of software that is capable of managing complex supply chain processes, which are inventory management, production planning, the MRP, right, which is the calculus of how much you need to put in stock to buy and to get to produce at the right time. And so that's basically the first layer we have. We have a very a fundamental layer which allows us to manage complex supply chain processes. The second thing is thanks to the no code, and we didn't build no code for no code users. We built no code for manufacturing users. And so basically we allow manufacturing users to very intuitively build processes. And what's like the difference between, a no code tool is you build your process in Bonx, it's directly live, and you know exactly what happened, what changes in the process, and how the interface is and ends up being as a consequence of building the process. And so it ends up being very simple from a usage point of view, also. So that's basically what we do. And then for the integration, we have all the GraphQL integration, API, and all that. So we are able to integrate very fast. But since we are also, built to integrate to many types of software, which we just do it it's a very fast integration with any finance or CRM software. And we also have a pragmatic approach during the deployment, which means that we don't necessarily integrate with everything. And very often you will see at manufacturing companies that they say it's a priority to integrate with their Shopify or with their machine and all that. Most of the time, there's one or two systems that are really critical to integrate. And what's really interesting is we've seen clients which actually did some connections themselves when they were ready to do them. And so they use our API to just connect some machines, to just connect their e-commerce software or whatever, and they do it themselves sometimes. And that's
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And the one thing that you mentioned, but I want kind of people to hear it again, is the fact that you're able to go live. You're able to integrate, implement, migrate, and go live in how many weeks? The fact you measured in weeks, not quarters, right? So say that again. How many weeks right now is the average?
The typical implementation for mid-market is probably 18, 24 months, so almost 2 years, on average. What we are doing on average right now is 4-6 weeks on our customer base. Yeah,
it's amazing. And for either kind of CEOs or CFOs, other leaders of such organizations listening, right? They can map that directly to dollar signs.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's time of your team that are not used to deploy the tool. It's actually your ROI payback, which is much faster and all that. This is both linked to the product, but also the methodology, right? So the product allows a certain methodology that allows us to go very, very fast. And if you summarize the deployment process, it's basically we integrate their article base and the right databases to work with the tool. Then we map in 2 to 4 workshops their processes, which takes a few hours, right? Then we go live on the first sales order, on a few sales orders to show the full flow. And once you've gone live, basically the deployment takes care of itself because users start adopting the product and they start using it for managing their sales orders. And so you are just a few days or a few weeks from deployment when you're at that point.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that really stuck out, right, is we talked about kind of the Bonx approach or philosophy that will be excellent at production operations. And so we have an ability to implement or integrate rather into adjacent software, accounting, finance, sales. But that also allows you to reduce friction in sales cycle, right? Because you don't need to go convince a CFO to change a general ledger or a sales organization to get rid of their CRM tooling. What would you say to kind of perhaps the investor audience, right? Keely, that hey, sales cycles in this type of subject matter will be 12 to 24 months, because what we found is we could do that significantly shorter. But how do you think about it? Because maybe this isn't something that we talk about frequently because we just benefit from it.
No, it's fundamental, right? So the way software for enterprise is moving is you have this best of breed approach. What is best of breed is since integration is becoming easier and easier, and the need for easy to use tools and deep tools on every function is becoming bigger and bigger, you need to have softwares that are focusing on one area and just very easy to connect to other softwares. By the way, this is increased very, very fast with AI, because AI allows you to do some integrations much, much faster than like traditional APIs.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. Yeah. And then if you talk about like the sales cycles and stuff, like we have 10-week sales cycles. The way we have 10-week sales cycles is because we know who's buying our products. The CEO is buying our products. And as you said, we have a partnership approach and a synergic approach. We don't have a replacement of the general ledger approach. And so when we come, we say, oh, great, you love your QuickBooks, your NetSuite, whatever, we'll just connect to that. That's great. Just keep it. That's you love the product. It's working well. Keep it. We'll connect to that and we'll cover your operations.
Amazing. I'd love, to the extent we can, to kind of walk through a case study customer success story here.
Yeah, for sure. See, I think one that could be interesting, because also it has a bunch of integrations, is so we have a food customer, right? It's they produce water kefir, so it's kind of kombucha without caffeine, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's all those new types of beverages, food and beverages, that are like companies growing crazy fast, like almost as fast as tech startups. Like they have 200% growth. One of the fastest growing beverage company in France. And basically they came to us because, by the way, they had seen all the traditional vendors. So they had seen, I won't say the names, but like vertical ERPs, traditional ERPs, food ERPs, all of that. And basically they came to us because they were past 1 million turnover and they had planned to go to 4 million the next year. So in 1 year, from 1 to 4 million, right? In manufacturing, it's not as easy as in software to go from that to that,
Yeah.
because you have to increase the production capacity. And so basically they said, okay, the first step to do that is actually to automate the operations and to have the right ERP to then scale. And so that's kind of how we met. And they had, basically we sold them on, like how that we could do their unique use cases, but also that we had the right partners for them to digitize their company. So we partnered with a finance company called Penny Lane in France, who basically did the general ledger, and they had a kind of like food specific CRM that they wanted to use, and so that's we also connected to that. That's basically what we did. The ROI was very simple. It was a 3 months payback of what they of the in terms of ROI. Took about 6 weeks, 8 weeks to implement. And I think the unique thing about us and that particular use case, and why we won and why we win all those deals, is they had some very unique use cases. It can seem simple what they do, but they actually have some very unique use cases. For example, they have kefir seeds that are growing through the process. And so those kefir seeds are growing in like weight and size. And it's stupid, but traditional ERPs just cannot are incapable to deal with that. But for them, it's very important from an inventory management perspective, from a
Yeah.
traceability perspective, and all that. And so that's a big one I see. And typical of our ICP, they have mix of like very complex processes, mix of make to order and make to stock, and they are growing very, very fast. And so they have to have a software that can evolve very fast with their operations.
Sure. I have to ask, as I've been listening to you, if I'm a customer, how do I know that I might need to reach out to you and, consider whether Bonx is for me? What are the signs in my business? What's breaking or not working?
Yeah, I think any types of manufacturing we do have a big a big edge in any process industry. So like industries where you have kitchen recipes, any luxury industry, or any very complex bill of material industry. But we have really clients in all verticals, right? So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, if you are high growth and you don't trust the other vendors to have an ERP that can really evolve with the life of your company, that's our edge, because basically, since our users are autonomous, there's not a world where your ERP is different from what you actually need in your operations, because you make it evolve every time you have a different process, a different type of working, or that. So that's something I would say. And in terms of size and where you're at in your journey, anywhere from 1 million to the 100 million turnover, that's a fine point to start using Bonx. We even do some like startup plans for companies that don't have revenue yet, or like have a very few revenue but have been like VC financed and all that. But yeah.
Amazing, amazing. And as a result, what I think people need to understand is it really is kind of this mid-market, but even kind of emergent. Every mid-market company starts small at some point. So equally, there's that flexibility. But kind of the the one thing that I've been really interested and impressed, frankly, to see is you've been signing customers outside of your home market in France, right? There's some kind of in Spain. There's some now emerging in Italy. But talk to us about this approach, right? And this effort, because I think this is what every early stage European startup aspires for, right? Very quickly, kind of breaking out of their home market and showing, hey, they not only have the vision, but the ability to execute across the continent.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, as a European company, it's really one of the key aspects you need to be good at, because if you want to reach a significant market, in the end, you're going to have to go to other geographies, and it's different than going from state to state in the US, for example, because you have different language, different regulations, and all that. The great thing about Bonx is that it's not politically regulated, right? There's no like governance or compliance or all that, because we are manufacturing software essentially, and manufacturing is the same in China as it is in the US, as it is in Europe, and all that. So we really can adapt very fast to every market. So we said, okay, we don't have to really adapt the product, or at least that's one of our assumptions. And so we just started selling in Italy. So we willingly opened Italy, and how we did it is I used the same methodology that I used at OSS when I had to do a new go-to-market on a startup. Is at the beginning you want to have very well-defined tests to, like very like really scientific method of go-to-market, to say, that's my hypothesis in the market, that's what I'm going to test in the next 2 weeks, and at the next 2 weeks this will determine like what I actually want as results, and what will determine if I go find another approach, or if I stop, or if I all of that. And so that's what we did for the first months, and it ended up that everything we had done in France, the sales playbook, right? So how we found customers through cold call and cold emailing, just worked really well in Italy as well. And so we got the first leads that way. And by the way, we were helped by a great and bright junior person called Francesca, and she came to be your right hand, but she basically ended up opening Italy with me, those past months. But yeah, that's basically, and at some point you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If the thing you did in your market works in the next market, just assume that might work and test it, and maybe change your approach. But
yeah, kind of test your existing playbook before you think you need to reinvent it. In a new market. I would kind of stop and maybe ask you to reflect. What do you think the most significant lesson you've learned selling to the mid market is so far on the Bonx journey?
Yeah, I think it's dependent also on what product you're selling, right? For us, because I've seen every type of sale. I've seen selling in at OSS where we were selling, bill of material products for very big CAC 40, Fortune 500 companies, and like very long sales cycles. I've seen very fast sales cycles and all that. The thing about Bonx is it has a lot of aspects of complex sales, because you are selling a very big ticket. It's probably the most expensive software the company will ever buy. You are selling to a CEO, so you have to be able to talk business, and to understand the business of the person you're talking about. You are doing so you are doing some value selling. So it has a lot of aspects of a complex sale, right? The thing that's a bit different from a non-traditional enterprise sale is that it's very fast, and you don't have many stakeholder management, because you are talking to max 3 people in the sales process, or at least max 3 people have an actual influence on the decision. And so it makes things very fast. It makes things very clear who you need to talk to and who you need to convince. So that's at least on my particular segment for the mid-market we are addressing, and like the products we're addressing. That's what we've learned. So it's a weird, like Frankenstein between an enterprise sales motion and SMB sales motion.
Yeah. So I'm gonna kind of start bringing us home here, right? As we look ahead to the next 5 years, what's the vision you have for Bonx, and how does that kind of work with maybe where you're seeing the mid-market ERP landscape moving?
Yeah. So our vision, right, is for the world. So we want to solve problems for manufacturers around the world. And like we probably won't go to huge companies, Fortune 500, but we want to go to market quite fast in our journey, because that's also where the problems are, and big problems are to be solved. And so if I take in 5 years, we'll probably be as big in the US as we are in Europe, and really well known as the new leader, let's say, in manufacturing ERP. And the go-to option if you want to have the best of breed and best-in-class software for manufacturing operations.
Amazing. I, for one, are super excited to realize that future, but I'm also a bit biased being an investor. But let's wrap it up here, Alex. I like to do this thing that I call rapid fire. I'm going to give you 3 prompts. You have 20 seconds just to give me your immediate response. You ready?
For sure, let's go.
First up, what is the one feature you're most proud of at Bonx?
There's many, Santosh. I think probably I'll give a recent one. One of the recent ones is we have basically we are able to go to a customer that has very complex planning. Like basically we have like a lot of orders a day, need to schedule the production accordingly, making sure to optimize the schedule. And it's a very big mess in companies, because you have to either the ERP has to do that, or you have an Excel sheet that connects to the ERP, or you have spreadsheets everywhere. And it's just way too many variables and way too many calculations for a single human to do. And so you sometimes have several people doing that in manufacturing companies, just optimize that daily scheduling. And what we built at Bonx is basically we have a very simple, way to basically we built the feature to have inputs, enter inputs, and give outputs. And we connected that to AI so that it can read specific business rules. So you are an additive manufacturing client, or you are a food manufacturing client, you feed your business rules, which are in natural language. Usually they have that in like a PDF or like somewhere in Words or in Excel, whatever. So we feed that to Bonx, and Bonx is able to understand those business rules and optimize the schedule on a daily basis.
Amazing.
According to that.
That's awesome. That's awesome, right? And kind of like real tangible way that AI is starting to impact kind of the industrial economy as well. Because there's a whole lot of noise there, in my opinion. And this is something that's like actually moves the needle, so to speak. Next up here on my list, in one word, what is the future of ERP?
I'll say, well, it's 3 words in one, but I'll say best of breed.
All right. And then last up, a little kind of personal understanding of the man in front of us that we've spoken to over the last half an hour or so. What is your favorite leisure activity in Paris, your home?
Oh, well, there's many. There's celebrating deals when we sign deals at Bonx. There's you should go read French literature at Le Jardin du Luxembourg, the Luxembourg Gardens in Paris, or go disco dancing somewhere in Paris at a house party. That's also a thing French people like to do.
Well, maybe on my next visit for our next board meeting, we need to do some of that. But till then, Alex, appreciate you joining us here, sharing the Bonx story, but also highlighting the opportunity around kind of mid-market ERPs. And as always, the team and I look forward to seeing you and realizing your success.
Same. And thanks for the podcast, Santosh.
Absolutely. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. Follow us at dynamo.vc for all the latest episodes. We'll see you next time.